I never imagined that at 62 years old, I'd find myself driving through unfamiliar streets at 11 o'clock at night, my hands trembling on the steering wheel, my heart pounding so hard it felt ready to burst free from my chest. It had all begun 3 hours earlier. I was passing the sleek glass tower where Elijah Vance had worked for 25 years when I noticed the building was completely dark. The parking garage was empty, and a printed notice on the front door announced that the offices were closed for renovations starting at 6 that evening. For a moment I thought I had made a mistake, but no. The company's pristine logo glimmered faintly in the dark, mocking me. With shaking fingers, I dialed his number. "How's the project coming, my love?" I asked, forcing my voice to sound light, casual, like the devoted wife I had been for 4 decades. His answer came smooth and immediate, the kind of lie that only long practice could perfect. "Super busy here, Simone. Can't talk right now. The Tokyo project has us all pushing hard. Don't wait up for me, dear." Then I heard it. Soft moans, muffled laughter, the unmistakable sounds of intimacy, of betrayal. My stomach turned, but my mind, dulled for years by routine, snapped awake with terrifying clarity. I opened the family GPS app, the one I'd insisted we install after Elijah's minor car accident last year. The glowing blue dot of his silver Mercedes blinked steadily from a quiet, upscale neighborhood about 40 minutes away, an area of Atlanta we had never visited together. Every mile I drove felt like tearing another layer of skin from my body, exposing something raw and unbearable beneath. The neighborhood was beautiful, too beautiful. Craftsman-style homes with perfect lawns and hydrangeas blooming beneath golden streetlights. The kind of place where good people raised good children and hosted cheerful Sunday brunches. Elijah's car sat parked in front of a deep cobalt blue house with white trim and a porch swing. Light spilled from a second-floor window, shadows moving behind delicate lace curtains. I stopped 3 houses down, my headlights off, my breath shallow. It didn't make sense. This wasn't a hotel. It wasn't some sterile apartment for illicit meetings. It was a home. A mailbox painted with sunflowers stood by the curb, and the doormat read, "The Stanton Family." And then I saw her. A woman, older than I'd expected, perhaps mid-40s, appeared at the upstairs window. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun, and she wore a blue silk robe I recognized instantly. Elijah had given me the same one last anniversary. Mine was wine red. She looked down the street with a quiet satisfaction that pierced deeper than any act of passion could have. My phone buzzed. A text from Elijah. "Leaving the office now, love. Don't wait up. Grab dinner without me." The lie was so bold, so absurd, I almost laughed. Almost. I glanced at the clock. 11:43 p.m. How many nights had I eaten alone, slept alone, lived alone, while he built another life brick by brick, smile by smile? A movement at the window caught my eye. A boy, maybe 10 years old, with dark wavy hair. He tilted his head in a way that was achingly familiar. Elijah's way. The woman wrapped her arms around him, and together they vanished from view, disappearing into the cozy rhythms of their secret life. My husband's secret life. The word husband lost all meaning then. Became an empty floating sound. 40 years of marriage, 2 grown children, 3 grandchildren, all built on what? Lies, half-truths, and performance. A sharp pain shot through my chest, so sudden and real that I thought my heart was giving out. When I opened my eyes again, dawn had painted the horizon pale gray. My neck ached, my eyes were swollen, and the blue house still stood before me, proof it hadn't been a dream. Elijah's car was gone. I drove home in silence, the familiar streets guiding me like muscle memory. When I pulled into our driveway, Elijah was just stepping inside, briefcase in one hand, a box of donuts in the other. "My favorite kind." "Morning, my love," he said, kissing my cheek as if nothing had changed. "I brought your favorites, the Boston creams. I know I shouldn't have worked all night, but you know how these international projects are." And just like that, the lie continued. Sweetened by sugar, wrapped in routine, waiting for me to play my part once more. His performance was flawless. If I hadn't seen what I saw, if I didn't know what I knew, I would have believed every word. Every gesture, every carefully rehearsed lie. I found myself wondering how many years he'd been perfecting this act, how many mornings he'd walked through that door with deceit, tucked neatly inside a white bakery box. How thoughtful, I said, surprised at how calm, how normal my voice sounded. Why don't you shower while I make the coffee? He nodded, humming that same cheerful tune he always whistled when he was in a good mood. The same melody I'd once thought endearing. Now it sounded like mockery. He'd probably been humming it for decades after nights spent in another woman's bed. As the shower began to run upstairs, I opened his briefcase. I had always prided myself on being discreet, the kind of wife who never snooped, never questioned. But that morning, my hands no longer trembled. Inside were the usual things: folders filled with work documents, a tablet, branded company pens. Then, tucked into a hidden compartment I'd never noticed before, I found something new: a second phone. The screen was lit with missed calls from home and a message that made my breath catch. "Daddy, don't forget my soccer game Saturday. Mommy says you promised to come. Love you, Jalen." My blood ran cold. Another woman. Another child. Another home. In that instant, the full picture began to take shape. The frequent business trips. The weekends spent at the office. The phone calls he'd taken out in the yard, away from my ears. The unexplained credit card charges that never translated into anything in our home. I wanted to think I'd been foolish. But no, I hadn't been stupid. I'd been a wife who trusted her husband. I had chosen to believe him because the alternative was too devastating to imagine. Memory, cruel and sharp, began to unspool. 15 years ago, I'd found a receipt from a jewelry store in his pocket. "It's for my boss's secretary," he'd said easily. "You know how he is, always making me run his errands." And I'd smiled, accepted it, and moved on. 10 years ago, our daughter Amara told me she'd seen him at an upscale mall, with a woman and a little boy. "Probably a colleague's sister," I'd replied. "Your father's always helping people." Amara had been 15 then. The boy in that window last night looked about 10. The math was merciless. I heard the shower turn off. Quickly, I replaced everything exactly as I'd found it. Deception, I realized, wasn't so hard to master after all. When Elijah came downstairs, his hair damp and the familiar scent of his cologne trailing him, I had the coffee ready and the donuts on a plate. "Sleep well?" he asked, biting into a Boston cream while scrolling through the news on his iPad. "Fine," I lied easily. "And you? Get any rest at the office?" He didn't look up. Couple hours on the sofa in the conference room. Daryl was snoring like a bear next door. Daryl. The same Daryl who had retired 6 months ago. I remembered the farewell dinner, the speech Elijah had given about loyalty and brotherhood. I felt sick. "Simone, are you all right? You look pale," he said, touching my forehead with genuine concern. Genuine, like everything else. I waited 3 days before going back. 3 days in which I played my role to perfection, smiling in all the right moments, responding with believable warmth, even making love to him once, picturing her face instead of mine. Elijah suspected nothing. How could he? For 40 years I had been entirely predictable. Simone the devoted wife. Simone the perfect mother. Simone the fool, but not anymore. That afternoon, I put on jeans and a gray hoodie I'd bought with cash, large sunglasses, a baseball cap pulled low. My hair was hidden, my face unfamiliar even to myself. The old Simone had died in that car 3 nights ago. At 2 o'clock, I parked near the Blue House again. The neighborhood was quiet, only the hum of a lawnmower and the distant bark of a dog. I called Elijah's office to confirm he was there, just as I'd planned. At 2:30, the front door opened. The woman, Candace, stepped outside, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just her. It was what she carried, a baby, no more than 6 months old, strapped to her chest in a soft carrier. The arithmetic of betrayal had just multiplied. 10 years, maybe more. A whole second life built meticulously alongside mine. I followed her on foot as she walked down the street, keeping my distance, pretending to check my phone whenever she paused. She entered a small, stylish cafe with potted plants hanging from the awning. I chose a table at the far end, my untouched coffee cooling by the minute. Candace met 2 other women, all of them chatting lightly about diapers, sleepless nights, the exhaustion of new motherhood. And then one of them said something that made my blood turn to ice. "Candace, you're so lucky Marcus is so involved. Not all husbands are that dedicated." Marcus. My Elijah was Marcus in this other life. Candace laughed softly, adjusting the baby strapped to her chest. "Yes, though with his work schedule it's complicated," she said with an affectionate sigh. "Sometimes he has to travel for 3 or 4 days, but he always makes up for it when he gets back. He's a wonderful father. 3 or 4 days. Those were the same business trips Elijah had taken for years, the same stretches of time when he returned to me, to his other world, to his other family. We had been alternating shifts in his carefully engineered calendar of deceit. I wondered if somewhere, on one of his devices, he kept a spreadsheet, a meticulous record of lies, color-coded for convenience. "How's Jalen adjusting to the new baby?" one of the women asked. "Jealous at first," Candace replied. "But Marcus, my husband, has been amazing. He bought him a new baseball glove, and now they spend Saturday afternoons together while I rest." Saturday afternoons. The same Saturdays, Elijah had work seminars he could never miss. Another piece slid neatly into place, cruel in its precision. I stood to leave, my hands trembling. But then Candace unlocked her phone to show pictures. I couldn't stop myself from glancing as I walked past. There he was. Elijah. My Elijah. Smiling on a beach, tan and relaxed, with the little boy perched on his shoulders. Candace, visibly pregnant, stood beside him, radiant. I recognized the background instantly. Turks and Caicos, the corporate retreat he'd attended last year. The air seemed to vanish from my lungs. I stumbled out of the cafe, barely seeing where I was going. My mind was a blur of images. His lies, his laughter, his hands on her shoulders instead of mine. I cut through a small park on my way back to the car, and then I froze. A familiar voice carried through the crisp afternoon air. "That's it, champ. Kick harder!" Elijah. He stood by the goalpost, coaching a group of 10-year-olds, wearing the same blue jacket he always wore on his supposed meeting days. Jalen, his son. Their son ran toward him, his grin a perfect echo of Elijah's own. I watched them for 20 minutes. This man I had shared a life with, this stranger I had loved. He wasn't pretending. His laughter was real, his encouragement genuine. I saw the same tenderness he'd once shown our children, but sharper, livelier, untouched by guilt. Who was the real Elijah? The man who ate breakfast with me every morning? Or the one who coached soccer in this park? The one who made love to me on Sundays? Or the one who took another family to the beach? Did a real Elijah even exist? Or were we all just characters in his private theater, each performing our assigned role? My phone rang. It was him. "Hey, love," he said brightly. "Meeting finished early. Want me to pick something up for dinner?" Across the park, he was still shouting encouragement to the team. I swallowed the rising bitterness. "That would be perfect, darling," I said evenly. "Bring some wine. The Napa Valley Cabernet we like. I know the one. I love you, Simone." "I love you too," I replied, the words turning to ash as they left my tongue. That night, he slept beside me, breathing softly, like a man with nothing to hide, nothing to haunt him. I slipped into the bathroom and stared at my reflection in the mirror. 62 years old. 40 of them devoted to a man who had built a double life with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker. At first, the tears were silent. Then came the sobs, deep, wrenching, the kind that made me press a towel to my mouth so he wouldn't hear. But I wasn't only mourning the betrayal. I was mourning myself. Who was I without him? Who had Simone been before she became Mrs. Elijah Vance? The girl who had dreamed of painting in Paris? The one who had won a scholarship and turned it down because Elijah had said, "The art will always be there, but the time for children won't." And I had believed him. I had traded canvases for cribs, exhibitions for parent-teacher meetings. I didn't regret my children. Amara and Jamal were the best parts of my life, but somewhere along the way, Simone the artist had vanished. Simone the woman had dissolved into Simone the wife. The next morning, while Elijah was at his office, whichever one that meant, I climbed into the attic. Dust-covered boxes waited there, filled with forgotten versions of myself. My old sketchbooks, brittle and yellowed at the edges, paints hardened in their tubes, brushes stiff with neglect, and letters, photos, proof that once there had been love, or something that looked convincingly like it. Our wedding day. Elijah's trembling hands as he promised fidelity before God and 200 guests. Amara's birth. Jamal's first steps. His laughter, his tears, all captured on film. Were any of those moments real? The phone rang again. Amara. Mom, are you okay? You've been different lately. I took a deep breath. I'm fine, honey, I said, forcing warmth into my voice. But the truth sat heavy in my chest. For the first time in 40 years, I wasn't sure who fine was supposed to be. Just a little tired. Are you sure? I can stop by if you want. The kids are asking for Grandma. The kids. My grandchildren. Elijah's official grandchildren. I wondered if they knew they had an uncle and a little aunt in that blue house, a secret set of siblings they would never meet. The web of deceit spread wide and fine, a poisonous tapestry threading through innocent lives. Sunday is better, I replied. Dad will be home. A lie. On Sunday afternoons, Elijah had golf with clients. Now I knew those weren't business games. They were picnics, family days, soccer practices at the Blue House. After hanging up, I returned to my investigation. The bank statements I had ignored for years now told their story with brutal clarity. Regular transfers to an unfamiliar account. Purchases from stores we never visited. Medical expenses that didn't match any of our records. Elijah had been maintaining 2 homes. 2 families. And I had been too trusting, too comfortable in my curated ignorance, to notice. Invoices followed. Private academy tuition, music classes, summer camps. Jalen played the violin. The baby, whose name I still didn't know, had been born at Emory University Hospital, the same place where our children had entered the world. The symmetry was obscene. The audacity, almost admirable in its precision. That afternoon, I did something I'd never done. I hired a private investigator, a discreet man, Agent Sterling, recommended by a friend who had survived a brutal divorce. I need to know everything, I told him. How long, how it started, everything. He studied me for a long moment before replying. Are you sure you want to know everything? His voice carried the fatigue of someone who'd destroyed more illusions than he cared to count. Yes, I said, though the word trembled, because I wasn't sure of anything, except that I couldn't keep living inside this theater of lies. That night, Elijah came home with flowers. Calla lilies, my favorite, or perhaps the favorite of the Simone he thought I still was. I no longer knew where his version of me ended and my true self began. Which of my tastes, habits, and dreams were genuinely mine, and which had been sculpted to please him. You look beautiful, he said over dinner, taking my hand. A week later, Sterling came to the house while Elijah was away, playing husband at the Blue House. He laid a thick folder on my dining table, the same table where we had celebrated 40 Christmases, 40 birthdays, an entire lifetime of rehearsed happiness. Mrs. Vance, he said gently, what I'm about to show you isn't easy to digest. Are you sure you want to continue? I nodded. My hands trembled as I opened the folder. The first page was a marriage certificate. Marcus Stanton had married Candace Stanton 12 years ago. Marriage. Not an affair. Not a mistress. Another wife. But this is illegal, I stammered, the words stumbling from my mouth. Technically, yes, Sterling said. He used falsified documents, an alternate identity he's maintained flawlessly for years. Elijah Vance and Marcus Stanton are the same man, but legally they exist as 2 separate people. It's a professional job. Your husband is no amateur. The next pages were worse. Photographs of their wedding, an intimate beach ceremony. Candace in a simple white linen dress. Elijah smiling that familiar, disarming smile I once thought belonged only to me. Then came the birth certificates. Jalen Stanton, born 11 years ago, 3 months after Elijah's emergency medical conference in San Diego. Sky Stanton, 7 months old, born while he was supposedly at a corporate leadership retreat. "There's more," Sterling said, turning the page. Elijah, Marcus, owns several properties under his alternate identity. The Blue House, a condo in Miami, a cabin in the Smoky Mountains, all paid for in cash, no loans, no paper trail. My stomach twisted. My inheritance. My mother's inheritance, the money she'd left me 15 years ago for our future. Elijah had promised he'd invested it wisely for our retirement. Now I knew where it had gone. He had used my dead mother's money to fund his other life. How is this even possible? I whispered. How can someone live like this for so long? Sterling's eyes softened, the way a man's might after seeing too much human wreckage. I've seen similar cases, he said quietly, but never one quite this elaborate. Your husband manages 2 businesses, one under each name. The second is a consulting firm that explains his extra income and his absences. It's brilliant in a twisted, terrible way. I kept turning pages. School records for Jalen, an excellent student, captain of the youth soccer team. Medical files for Candace. Notes about fertility treatments Elijah had quietly paid for long before she could conceive. They had struggled to have children just as we had once. The irony tasted like poison. There's one more thing you should know, Sterling said, his tone tight with discomfort. Candace doesn't know about you. To her, her husband is a widower. In the story he told her, his first wife, Simone, died in a car accident 15 years ago. In Elijah's narrative for his other family, I was dead. He had metaphorically buried me so he could create another life. I found myself imagining whether he ever pictured my body sleeping in another house while he made love to Candace. Why? I asked, needing something, anything, to explain the elaborate theater. Sterling pulled out another file. He'd interviewed acquaintances from both circles. Apparently, Elijah met Candace when she was his physical therapist after knee surgery. The memory returned sharp. The months when he complained of pain, the 3 times a week therapy appointments, my own life consumed with caring for my dying mother. While I held my mother's hand in her last days, he was planting seeds for a second family. Based on the dates, Sterling said quietly. It looks like he chose to maintain both lives rather than decide. Maybe because of the children, maybe the finances, maybe because he could. The financial documents were obscene. Nearly $3 million flowed between accounts tied to both identities. Money traced back to investments, purchases, properties. $3 million, my inheritance. The sum my mother had left me 15 years ago, money Elijah had promised he'd invested for our retirement, had instead seeded his secret empire. I fled to the bathroom and vomited until there was nothing left but bile. Sterling waited, professional and patient. When I returned, he asked, "What do you want to do with this?" "I need time to think," I lied at first. Then I surprised myself. "Can you get me everything on his finances?" "Every account, every investment, every asset." "Of course." "Are you considering divorce?" he asked. "I'm considering justice," I said, surprised by the edge in my voice. For 3 days I hid in a hotel, telling Elijah I was visiting my sister in Chicago. It felt obscene to lie after the truth I had uncovered, but I needed the distance to breathe and to plan. Sterling's folders lay across the bed like indictments. In that impersonal quiet, I made a decision that would change everything. I would not be his victim. I would not slip away silently with a divorce that let him keep his illusions. I would dismantle his house of cards, but with a surgeon's precision, not a scorned wife's wild fury. First, I needed allies. I called Jamal, my son and a corporate law attorney. "Son, I need your help with something delicate. Can you meet me at the Marriott Marquis, room 512? He arrived within the hour, worried and bewildered. I laid out the files. I watched his face move from confusion to disbelief, to a cold, controlled rage I recognized as my own. "I'm going to destroy him," he said, voice steady and lethal. "Bigamy, fraud, tax evasion, forgery. He's exposed. You don't have to put him in jail," I said. "I want something worse. I want him to lose everything he values, but to live to watch it unravel." Jamal's expression shifted. Admiration. A new respect. "What do you have in mind?" he asked. I told him my plan. It was complex, patience, careful acting, and a cruelty I hadn't known I possessed. Jamal proposed legal refinements to make it airtight. We'd need Amara, too. She handles public relations at the firm, and her media savvy would be essential when everything exploded. Amara's reaction was raw and messy, an hour of crying, then rage, then more tears. "How could he?" she kept repeating, but grief gave way to strategy. "We must control the narrative," she said through tears. "When this comes out, it must be absolute. Dad, the undisputed villain." I called one more person no one would expect me to call, Elijah's sister Patricia, with whom I'd always had an easy rapport. I needed family on my side. And if there was one thing this betrayal had taught me, it was that no one should be allowed to build an alternate life without paying for it. As the plan grew, the truth felt less like a shattering and more like a tool. I was no longer simply the betrayed wife. I was an architect of consequence. The part of me that had once folded quietly into others was waking up, sharp, purposeful, and relentless. Patricia listened in silence as I told her everything. When I finished, she let out a long, heavy sigh. "I always knew something wasn't right," she admitted. The trips, the excuses, the little details he sometimes mixed up. "I thought he was having an affair, but this..." She shook her head slowly. "This is something else entirely." "I need access to your mother's safe deposit box," I said. Patricia, as executor of my mother-in-law's will, was the only one who could get to it. "Elijah keeps important documents there." Patricia hesitated, then met my eyes. "Mom always loved you more than him, you know. She used to say you were too good for Elijah." She took a deep breath. "You'll have what you need." The plan took form like a storm gathering shape. Over the next few weeks, I hired a second investigator, one who specialized in financial fraud. He uncovered a pattern of tax evasion so meticulous it could have been taught in a seminar. 2 identities, 2 sets of accounts, one man living between them like a ghost. A forensic accountant traced the money trail piece by piece, building a case that would make the IRS salivate. Jamal, my son, prepared legal documents, not for an immediate divorce, but to freeze Elijah's assets the moment I gave the signal. Amara, my daughter, worked her network in the media, priming them for the story of the year. Respected businessman exposed for living a double life spanning a decade. I returned home to my role, slipping back into character as the loyal wife. Elijah noticed nothing. Why would he? Years of deceit had bred arrogance. He kissed me every morning, called every afternoon, and made love to me at night, pleased no doubt by my sudden tenderness. One evening over dinner, he smiled across the table. "I've been thinking about retirement," he said. "Maybe in a few years we could travel, see the world like we always talked about." "That sounds wonderful," I replied smoothly, refilling his wine glass. "Where would you go first?" "Italy, maybe, or Greece. Somewhere with art and history. I know how much you love art. The art I gave up for you," I thought, smiling sweetly. "That would be perfect." He spoke of the future with easy confidence, never realizing I was counting the days to the end. The next 6 weeks were a performance worthy of an award. I became the version of Simone he had fallen in love with decades ago. Warm, attentive, radiant. I cooked his favorite meals, waited up no matter how late he returned, and reached for him at night with a passion that thrilled him. He had no idea that every kiss, every gesture, was part of a quiet choreography leading him toward ruin. "You're glowing lately," he murmured one morning, wrapping his arms around me as I made coffee. "What's changed?" "I've decided to appreciate what we have," I said softly. "Life's too short, don't you think?" Behind that gentle smile, my trap was tightening. Jamal uncovered that Elijah's consulting firm, under the name Marcus Stanton, had won several lucrative government contracts using confidential information only Elijah Vance could have accessed. It was corporate fraud on a federal scale. Meanwhile, Amara began planting seeds online, subtle, anonymous posts hinting at the uncanny resemblance between the mysterious Marcus Stanton and businessman Elijah Vance. Nothing accusatory, just enough to make people curious. Then came the jackpot. The financial investigator located a Cayman Islands account with over $5 million, money siphoned for years from my inheritance, our joint investments, our supposed future. It was our money, hidden for his eventual escape. But the final blow came from Patricia. In her mother's safe deposit box, she found the original will of my father-in-law, not the version Elijah had filed. In the real one, everything was placed in a trust for the grandchildren, with me as administrator. Elijah had forged documents to inherit it all himself. Another crime, another nail in his coffin. One afternoon, I drove to the Blue House. This time I didn't hide. I parked right in front and watched him arrive. He stepped out of the car transformed, lighter, freer, younger somehow. Jalen ran into his arms, and Elijah lifted him, spinning the boy until they both laughed. Candace came out with the baby, smiling, and the scene before me was almost cinematic in its perfection. And that's when I understood. This was his real life. I was the duty, the history, the face of obligation. That family, the one in the Blue House, was the life he wanted. Oddly, the realization didn't break me. It clarified everything. I wasn't tearing down a marriage. I was exposing a fraud. This wasn't vengeance. It was justice. That night, he came home smelling faintly of baby powder, a smear of marinara sauce on his cuff. "Sorry I'm late," he said, kissing me absently. The meeting ran long. "No problem," I replied, noting the child's drawing peeking out of his briefcase. "Did you eat?" "Grabbed something at the office," he said easily. "But I'd love a glass of wine with you." We sat together, him talking about his imaginary meetings, me nodding on cue. At one point, he rested his head in my lap, the kind of tender gesture we hadn't shared in years. "Are you happy, Simone?" he asked suddenly. The question startled me. "Why do you ask?" "I don't know," he sighed. "Sometimes I feel like I lost something, like I took a wrong turn somewhere and I can't find my way back." It was the most honest thing he had said in years. For a fleeting moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. "We all make choices," I murmured, running my fingers through his hair. "The important thing is living with the consequences." He smiled faintly. "I suppose you're right." The next morning, Jamal called. "Everything's ready. The documents are filed. The IRS has been anonymously tipped. The journalists are waiting. All we need is your word." "Friday," I said. "Our 40th wedding anniversary." Elijah had booked the most exclusive restaurant in the city, invited our closest friends and family. It would be public. It would be devastating. It would be perfect. "Are you sure?" Jamal asked quietly. "Once this begins, there's no turning back." I thought of Candace, of Jalen, of Little Sky, their innocent faces, their unknowing smiles. They too were victims of his deceit, but to save them, I would have to destroy myself, and I was done sacrificing for Elijah Vance. "I'm sure," I said. My voice was calm, unshakable. 40 years of lies, I whispered. "They end on Friday." The restaurant, the Gilded Lyre, gleamed like a jewel against the city skyline, an ironic name, though Elijah hadn't noticed. He had rented the entire main hall, a gesture so lavish it bordered on arrogance. Crystal chandeliers bathed the room in warm gold, casting reflections on tables dressed in Egyptian linen. Each centerpiece was an arrangement of white orchids and red roses, the same colors I had chosen for my wedding bouquet 40 years ago. A string quartet played Our Love Is Here to Stay, the song from our first dance. Every detail had been curated for perfection. Every note, every bloom, like a shrine built to worship a lie. I wore a blood-red gown I had chosen specifically for this night. It hugged my figure with the kind of boldness Elijah used to call unbecoming of a respectable wife. My hair was swept up in an elegant twist that framed the diamond necklace my mother left me, the one Elijah never knew I'd reclaimed from the safe deposit box. My makeup was deliberate. Red lips, smoky eyes, a war mask disguised as beauty. Guests called me radiant. They mistook the gleam of vengeance for happiness. Elijah, ever the polished showman, wore his navy Italian suit, the silk tie I'd given him for our 30th anniversary, and gold cufflinks that once belonged to his father. He looked immaculate, an image of fidelity so convincing it would have fooled God himself. "You are absolutely spectacular," he whispered as he pulled out my chair. His hand brushed my shoulder, a gesture that once meant intimacy, now just performance. "I can't believe you still take my breath away after all these years." "And you," I thought, "still know how to lie with elegance." "You're not so bad yourself," I replied, my smile honed sharp enough to draw blood. 50 guests filled the room, an audience carefully chosen. His business partners who would need to see the fall. Our society friends who would spread the story faster than any newspaper. Family who deserved to know the truth. Each one seated precisely where they needed to be. Jamal and Elena near the stage. Amara and her fiancé by the projection screen. Patricia stationed near the exit, just in case Elijah decided to flee. Dinner began with oysters. Elijah's least favorite dish, but one he had ordered for show because they were my favorite. Another illusion of devotion. Champagne flowed freely. Dom Perignon, the vintage from our wedding year. Elijah made sure everyone knew the cost. "Elijah is the perfect husband," Brenda Jenkins cooed as she savored her lobster. "You're so lucky, Simone." "You have no idea," I replied with a smile so serene it could have been mistaken for gratitude. At 9:30, as the Belgian chocolate desserts were served, Elijah stood and gently tapped his glass. The quartet fell silent. All eyes turned to him. "Dear friends, dear family," he began, his voice warm, commanding, a tone that once melted me. 40 years ago, in a small downtown bookstore, I met the woman who would change my life. Simone became my wife, my confidant, my anchor. A few women dabbed their eyes with napkins. Brenda sighed dreamily. The men nodded with admiration. Elijah continued, his voice trembling just enough to seem genuine. "We've faced hardships, but Simone has been my light, my safe harbor in every storm." The irony clawed at my throat. Every night he was supposedly guided home by that light. He was driving to another house, to her. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small blue velvet box. "I want to renew my vows tonight, in front of all of you." Gasps rippled through the crowd as he opened it. A diamond eternity band glittering inside. "Simone," he said, eyes shining, "will you continue to be my wife for another 40 years? Applause erupted. Someone shouted, "Bravo!" Cameras flashed. It was the perfect cinematic moment. I stood, slow and deliberate. Let him believe it was awe. Let him savor the moment before the fall. I accepted the ring, its cold weight pressing into my finger like a shackle. Then, as the applause died, I smiled. "My turn," I said softly, my voice carrying through the hall. 40 years is a long time. Long enough to know every secret, every truth, every lie, Elijah chuckled nervously, still oblivious. "Always dramatic, my Simone." I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. "I've prepared something special for tonight, a gift, really. Because anniversaries should be about transparency, don't you think?" Jamal's signal light blinked from the tech booth. The room darkened. I pressed play, Elijah's voice filled the silence, clear, confident, unmistakable. "Candace, my love, I'm heading home now. Yeah, I know Jalen's game is at 8. Don't worry. I told Simone I have a conference this weekend. She never suspects a thing. Trust me, after all these years, she's still blindly trusting. It's almost pathetic how easy it is." A stunned hush swallowed the room. The champagne flute slipped from Elijah's hand and shattered, scattering shards across the marble floor like splintered truth. His face drained of color. That's not," he stammered. "Oh, but wait," I interrupted, my tone smooth and deadly. "There's so much more." The projector flickered to life behind me. On the screen, Elijah, my husband, stood barefoot on a beach, smiling down at another woman in a white linen dress. The caption below the photograph read, "Marcus and Candace Stanton, 12 years ago." The next image on the screen silenced even the whispers. Jalen's birth certificate. Father, Marcus Stanton. Then came the Christmas photos, 10 years of them. Elijah smiling beside a woman and 2 children in front of a tree I had never decorated. The final image was a sonogram, labeled Sky Stanton. "To the best dad in the world. Love, Candace." Gasps rippled through the room like waves. Each revelation hit harder than the last. Brenda Jenkins went pale, her manicured hand pressed over her mouth. Devin Harris, Elijah's longtime business partner, stared at the screen in horror, already calculating the damage to their empire. Patricia, my sister-in-law, wept quietly at the back of the room, her face buried in her hands. 40 years, I said, circling Elijah as the images looped behind me. 40 years living with a bigamist, a pathological liar, a criminal. Yes, dear friends, a criminal. Bigamy is a felony, punishable by prison time. Simone, please. Elijah finally managed, his voice cracking. He took a step toward me, hands raised as if pleading with a wild animal. We can talk about this privately. Don't do this here. Jamal stood before me, tall and calm. Don't come near my mother. His tone was controlled, deadly. And before you even think of running, the IRS already has copies of your statements, including that Cayman Islands account with the $5 million you hid. The prosecutor has your contracts too. All of them. The ones you signed as Marcus Stanton. A collective murmur filled the room. Elijah turned, desperate, searching the crowd for an ally. Amara stepped up and took the microphone the quartet had abandoned. To our guests, she began, her voice steady, we're sorry you have to see this, but after 40 years of public lies, the truth deserves a public stage. My father didn't just betray my mother. He betrayed all of us. This is insane, Elijah snapped, spinning toward Devin. You know me, Dev. 20 years of friendship. You know I wouldn't. Wouldn't what? Devin's voice was cold, disgust replacing loyalty. Lie? Cheat? Forge identities? Apparently, I didn't know you at all. I opened my purse and drew out an envelope. You have two choices, Elijah, I said quietly, placing the divorce papers on the table before him. Sign these, relinquishing every claim to our assets, or face trial for bigamy, tax fraud, and forgery. Your choice. Patricia stood then, her voice trembling but clear. Elijah, she said, I found Dad's real will. The one you forged is already with the authorities. Mom always knew something was wrong with you. It was the final blow. Elijah's shoulders sagged. The color drained from his face. The mighty man collapsed into the chair like a felled monument. His hand shook as he reached for the pen I offered him. When he signed, tears fell onto the paper, blurring his name. His last act of surrender. What followed was swift and merciless. Justice unfolding with surgical precision. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the balcony of my hotel suite, still wearing the red dress, watching the city lights pulse below. My phone vibrated constantly. Calls, messages, reporters, but I answered none. My makeup had streaked down my face in dark trails, but I didn't wipe it away. It felt like war paint after the battle. At 6 a.m., Jamal arrived with coffee and his laptop. It's done, he said. Dad signed the papers. The accounts are frozen. The divorce is legally binding. His tone was brisk, efficient, the lawyer in him thriving where the son might have faltered. An hour later, Amara swept in with her crisis PR team. 3 young women armed with tablets and unshakable focus. They transformed the suite into a command center. The press embargo lifts in 2 hours, Amara announced. We've secured exclusives with 3 major papers and 2 national networks. The hashtag's already trending. By 9, the story detonated. Prominent businessmen exposed. Double life, bigamy, fraud, 12 years of deception. Within minutes, the bigamist of the year was everywhere. The photos, Elijah with both families, spread across every platform. Memes appeared by the hundreds, each more merciless than the last. At 10:15, the hotel front desk called. Mrs. Vance, reporters are in the lobby requesting a statement. Tell them my lawyer will speak at 2, I replied. Calm now steel beneath the exhaustion. 11 Elijah's company released a statement. Effective immediately. Mr. Elijah Vance has been suspended pending investigation into severe ethical and financial misconduct. Devin Harris, once his partner, went on record soon after. If the allegations are true, Mr. Vance betrayed not just his family, but every partner, employee, and client who trusted him. At 3:47 p.m., my phone rang from an unknown number, and I knew, even before I answered, that the wreckage of Elijah Vance's empire had only just begun to fall. It was Candace. Her voice came through the line like shattered glass, sharp, splintered, cutting through the silence. Is it true? She asked without preamble. You are Simone Vance, I said evenly, his first and only legal wife. No cruelty, but no comfort either. I never died, Candace. He killed me metaphorically so he could have you. I'm sorry. You're a victim in this too. Her breath hitched. The children... A sob tore through her words. My God, the children. Jalen adored his father. The baby? What do I tell them? How do I explain that their entire life is a lie? I don't know, I admitted softly. There were no words that could ease that pain. But children are resilient. With help, with therapy, with real love, they will heal. Did you know about us? She asked after a long pause. How long did you know? 2 months, I answered. 2 months of truth after 40 years of lies. I'm going to lose everything, she whispered. The house is in his name. The accounts too. I have nothing. I quit my job when Jalen was born because he insisted. It was another level of Elijah's cruelty, keeping her dependent, trapped. Give me your information, I heard myself say. My lawyer will contact you. You are not responsible for Elijah's crimes. We'll make sure you and the children are protected. Why? She asked, genuinely bewildered. Why would you help me? Because destroying Elijah doesn't mean destroying 2 innocent children, I said quietly. They didn't ask to be born into a lie. The next day, the IRS descended like a biblical plague. Federal agents raided Elijah's office, our home, and the Blue House. They seized boxes of documents, computers, hard drives, even cataloged his collection of luxury watches. The investigation unearthed a labyrinth of tax evasion stretching back 15 years. Offshore accounts, shell companies, fake invoices. It took 20 forensic accountants to begin untangling the mess. Jamal handled the legal side with surgical precision and executioner's coldness. Using the state's bigamy laws, which automatically nullified any financial claim by the bigamous spouse, he stripped Elijah of every right to our joint assets. The house, the investment properties, the stock portfolio, all transferred to my name. A week later, Jamal handed me a check. $3.7 million recovered from the Cayman account, he said. The rest will take years to trace. That afternoon, Patricia came to see me. She looked 10 years older, her face carved with shame and grief. Mom always knew something was wrong with Elijah, she said quietly. Before she died, she told me, take care of Simone when the truth comes out. I think she somehow knew. How is he? I asked, hating myself for caring. Destroyed, Patricia replied bluntly. Candace threw him out. No hotel in the city will take his booking. His face is everywhere. He's living in an extended stay motel off the highway, paying cash with what little they haven't frozen. No friends will answer his calls. He's a pariah, Simone. A man without a country. 3 weeks after the scandal, I was summoned to testify before the grand jury. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled by people hungry for the truth. I wore a simple black suit. No jewelry, except for my original wedding ring. The only piece of my old life I allowed myself to keep. For 4 hours, I told them everything. Every lie, every discovery, every wound. The jurors' faces shifted between sympathy and horror. The prosecutor, a young but sharp-eyed man named Aaron Mitchell, was methodical. Mrs. Vance, he asked, at any point during these 12 years, did you suspect your husband's infidelity? There were moments, I admitted. Small inconsistencies, strange absences. But Elijah was a master manipulator. Every time I got close to the truth, he built a lie so convincing, I felt guilty for doubting him. And what made you finally uncover the truth? Denial came first, I said. Then pain so deep it nearly split me in two. After that came anger, not hot but cold, precise. And finally determination. Determination that 40 years of lies would not define the rest of my life. The grand jury's verdict was unanimous. A formal indictment for bigamy, tax fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. Elijah faced up to 20 years in prison. A month later, he called from the county jail. His voice was unrecognizable, broken, aged. Why, Simone? He rasped. Why didn't you give me a chance to explain privately? Explain what, Elijah? How you accidentally built another life? Accidentally married another woman? Accidentally fathered 2 more children? It wasn't like that, he pleaded. Candace got pregnant. I couldn't abandon her. But you could abandon me, I said quietly. Every day. For 12 years, I loved you, Simone. I always loved you. No, I said with absolute clarity. You loved the idea of me. The perfect wife in your perfectly compartmentalized life. But you never loved the real me. You turned me into a prop in your elaborate fiction." He was silent for a moment. Then, brokenly, "The children. My other kids. What will happen to them?" Candace and I reached an agreement. "They'll be provided for through the recovered assets. They won't suffer for your crimes." "You and Candace are talking?" "The victims of the same man sometimes find comfort in understanding one another," I said. "Simone, please." "I just want—" "No, Elijah," I cut him off. "You don't have the right to want anything from me. You had 40 years of my life. You won't have another second." I hung up. It was the last time I ever heard his voice. 2 years have passed since that fateful anniversary dinner. This morning, as sunlight filled the kitchen of my new condo overlooking the Atlanta skyline, I received a notification on my phone. Elijah Vance released on good behavior. I felt nothing. No anger, no fear. Not even curiosity. The man who once shared my bed was a stranger now. Just a character in a story that happened to another Simone, one who no longer exists. My art exhibition opened last month. Its title, Portraits of an Invented Life. Each painting in my exhibition told a chapter of the same story: the blind wife, the awakening woman, the architect of her own liberation. The critics were generous, but what mattered most was what they could not see. Every brushstroke had been therapy, every color a small triumph over pain. At the opening, a man approached me. He was a widower, a retired literature professor with gentle eyes and a laugh that carried warmth instead of charm. "Your work moves me," he said softly. "There's pain, yes, but also hope." We had coffee that afternoon, dinner a few days later. No games, no pretenses. Just two people who knew that life could begin again, at any age. "Yesterday," Jamal called. "Dad tried to reach me," he said. "Does he want to reunite with the family?" I asked, though I already knew. I told him his family was us, for 40 years. He chose another. Now he lives with that choice. My son, my fierce protector. Amara was less forgiving. She simply blocked his number. Patricia visits sometimes. She told me Elijah now lives alone in a one-bedroom apartment, working quietly as a bookkeeper for a small firm that doesn't run background checks. Candace won't let him see the children until they're old enough to decide for themselves. It's a gray life, monotonous, honest, and small. But this story was never about Elijah. It's about Simone, about me, the woman who rose from the ashes of illusion to build something real. Yesterday, while organizing some old things, I found my diary from before Elijah. The girl who wrote those pages dreamed of Paris, of painting in Montmartre, of love and passion and light. At 64, I'm finally giving that girl what she always deserved. Next month, I fly to Paris, alone, with my brushes and a small suitcase. It's not the scholarship I once turned down, but it's mine. My choice, my money, my life. I'll rent a tiny studio near the Seine. I'll paint until my hands ache. I'll drink cheap wine with artists who know nothing of my past. While packing, I found a photograph of our wedding. Elijah and me, young, radiant, ignorant. I didn't rip it up. I didn't burn it. I simply placed it in a box labeled fiction, because that's what it was, a beautiful, terrible fiction. My phone rang. It was Michael, the literature professor. "Ready for our tango class?" he asked. "Yes," I said, smiling. "I'm learning tango, and Italian, and sculpting, and wine tasting. Something new every day. Each experience a declaration that life doesn't end with betrayal. It begins there." "Give me 10 minutes," I told him, applying the red lipstick Elijah once said was too bold for my age. Everything is bold now. Every day an act of bravery. Every choice an act of independence. Before leaving, I looked at my reflection. The woman in the mirror had wrinkles that told stories, gray hair she no longer hid, eyes that had seen too much, but still shone with hope. She was beautiful. Not despite her age and her history, but because of them. "Hello, Simone," I whispered. "It's good to finally meet you." And then, one final twist I hadn't expected. This morning, while sorting papers for my trip, I found an envelope marked with Agent Sterling's neat handwriting. "Open it only when you're ready," he had said. Inside was a letter from my mother, written shortly before she died. A letter Elijah had intercepted and hidden. My dearest Simone, if you are reading this, it means you have finally set yourself free. I always knew the truth about Elijah. I followed him once. I saw the other woman. But after you lost the baby, you were so fragile, so dependent, that I feared the truth would destroy you. I was a coward. I'm sorry. As a form of redemption, I've left another account, one Elijah does not know exists, just for you. The key is where we always hid our treasures when you were a child, the old oak tree. Live, my love. Live truly this time. I drove to my childhood home, now sold, but the new owners kindly let me search. Beneath the roots of the old oak, I found a small metal box. Inside, documents for a Swiss account. Enough to live 100 lives. My mother had given me freedom after death, not just financial, but emotional. She had known, and she had waited for the day I would be strong enough to claim my life back. I don't need the money, but I'll use it for a women's shelter, for art scholarships, for all the Simones still trapped in gilded cages. My story ends where it began, with a discovery, a revelation, a truth that changes everything. But this time, the truth does not destroy, it liberates. And I, Simone Vance, at 64 years old, am finally, gloriously free.